Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today, we're tackling an absolute cornerstone challenge for any modern security operations center, or SOC. We are talking about data collection. If you're a SOC analyst, a security engineer, an incident responder, or even a CISO, you already know that gaining real visibility into cyber activities requires thinking highly strategically about your data feeds. It's literally the lifeblood of your operations. But getting it right? Well, that is an entirely different story. Okay, let's dive into this, because this is a universal pain point. We've all been there, right? You ingest every single log, every tiny piece of network telemetry you can get your hands on, and what happens? Your CM absolutely grinds to a halt. Your storage costs go through the roof, and your analysts suffer from crippling alert fatigue. You are completely drowning in data, but you're starving for actual, actionable insights.
So to fix this, here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the data dilemma, move into planning your collection, look at host and network telemetry, tackle cloud and zero trust, break down tuning and retention, and finally wrap it all up with some actionable takeaways.
All right, Section 1, the data dilemma.
And this brilliantly illustrates the core issue we're facing. In the early days of cybersecurity, the prevailing wisdom was just collect everything. But as modern practitioners, we know for a fact that more data doesn't automatically equal better defense. This bell curve represents a really delicate trade-off. On the far left, too little data leaves you with massive blind spots. You miss critical alerts, and honestly, you can't justify the cost of your tools. But if you push too far to the right, the signal gets completely lost in the noise. Your analysts and tools just get totally overwhelmed. So the sweet spot is that peak right in the middle, collecting just enough to maximize your insights without breaking your team or your budget.
Moving right along to Section 2, planning data collection.
Elite SOCs don't just turn on default logging and hope for the best. They are incredibly methodical. Step 1, identify your mission drivers. What is actually critical to your organization's survival? Step 2, pick specific business use cases based on those drivers. And Step 3, target your top threats. Think about it. If ransomware is your absolute biggest nightmare, this top-down approach dictates that you need specific Windows event logs and file integrity monitoring rather than just hoarding every single firewall drop. It gives you concrete deliverables and turns this infinite sea of logs into a finite, manageable set of requirements.
But look, identifying the data is really only half the battle. You actually have to get it, and more importantly, keep getting it. Mature SOCs use formal Memorandums of Understanding, or MOUs, to secure long-term data access from system owners. Why? Because informal handshake agreements completely vanish the second a system administrator leaves the company. An MOU documents your technical points of contact, exactly what data you need, any regulatory responsibilities, and crucially, how you're going to budget for those transport and storage costs, especially as your enterprise applications scale into the cloud.
Okay, Section 3, host and network telemetry.
To execute this tactically, we have to face the reality of modern SOC architecture. Think about how disparate feeds from host-based sensors like EDR to network sensors pulling NetFlow, all the way up to your cloud telemetry, they all have to converge into your SIEM. This convergence is exactly what empowers an analyst sitting at their console to not just spot possible intrusion activity, but to correlate it across the entire environment and actually confirm it.
Let's compare the two foundational pillars here: network telemetry versus host telemetry. Network telemetry, like NetFlow or full packet capture, is absolutely fantastic for wide situational awareness. It answers the question, where else do I have a problem, and acts as a broad net for spotting anomalies. But with the massive proliferation of encrypted traffic, that deep visibility is definitely shrinking. Host telemetry, on the other hand, specifically EDR, well, that's your magnifying glass. It is vastly superior for confirming if an attacker actually compromised an endpoint, what specific processes they ran, and what files they touched. You absolutely need both, but they serve very different investigative purposes.
Next up, Section 4, cloud and zero trust.
Look, there's this dangerous misconception out there that just because an IT asset is living in the cloud, the provider is doing all the monitoring for you. Nope, not even close. Your security responsibilities carry over, but the cloud introduces some really unique complexities. Your asset topology is suddenly highly distributed. You've got to monitor the cloud control plane, integrate deeply with the identity plane like your single sign-on, and navigate all the nuances of monitoring infrastructure as a service versus software as a service, or even entirely serverless functions. A massive tip for security architects here: limit your sanctioned cloud providers to a manageable number. If your business units are using every cloud under the sun, you're going to completely fracture your monitoring stack and create massive blind spots.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how sensor deployment has to evolve. Because the traditional network perimeter has basically dissolved, zero-trust architecture requires highly layered monitoring. Sure, you have network metadata at the edge, but as you move inward, you're relying heavily on application-level firewalls, EDR on literally all hosts, and deep database monitoring like SQL firewalls. You are setting strict boundaries around applications and data, and you have to monitor access through every single one of those boundaries.
All right, Section 5, Tuning and Retention Strategies.
So getting all this set up is a massive achievement. But how on earth do we tame this fire hose so our bills don't skyrocket and our analysts aren't paralyzed by the noise? Well, there are two classic approaches to tuning. The first is tune down from everything. You just ingest the entire feed and try to filter out the noise. It doesn't require much foreknowledge and it's easy to set up, but it poses a massive risk of completely overloading your CM and your budget. The second approach is tune up from zero. Here, you start with a candidate feed and only allow specific, high-value alerts or event IDs through. It gives you a phenomenal, high-fidelity signal, but it requires really deep foreknowledge of how your systems work. Honestly, world-class SOCs leverage both methods, depending on the specific data source.
Beyond just tuning, you have to have a tiered retention strategy. Not all data needs to be kept in hot, incredibly expensive storage forever. For immediate SOC triage, you might only need EDR alerts or NetFlow for, say, 2 to 4 weeks. For deep forensic investigations, you might retain system and audit logs for about 6 months. But for external support, like a legal hold or a law enforcement investigation, you might be legally required to hold certain logs for 2 or more years. By tiering your storage like this, you save a ton of money while ensuring the exact right data is available for the right use case.
To optimize even further, elite SOCs are increasingly leveraging data right in place. Instead of expensively backhauling every single byte of data from thousands of endpoints into one centralized SIEM, which, by the way, scales terribly in terms of cost, they use tools that support distributed or federated queries. Basically, you query the data right where it lives, out on the edge or in the local cluster, and you pull back only the specific answers and context the analyst actually needs for their investigation. It's a total game changer.
Finally, Section 6, Actionable Takeaways and What's Next.
So, the crucial point is understanding where you are on this maturity arc. Take a second to gauge where your SOC currently stands. A beginner SOC basically collects any logs they can get their hands on, just hoping to find value later. An intermediate SOC has matured a bit. They're deploying EDR for deep host visibility, and they're actively mapping their sanctioned cloud assets. But an elite SOC? They are rigorously tuning their feeds based on top threats, they're discarding the noise, tiering their storage, and leveraging federated queries to analyze data efficiently right in place. It all really comes back to this core ethos for Strategy 7. A SIM is only as good as the data you feed it. That old adage of garbage in, garbage out is the absolute truth when it comes to security analytics. If you aren't being highly discriminating about what you bring in, you are actively diluting the value of your entire multi-million-dollar security stack. Which leaves us with a final, provocative thought to carry with you. Let's say you master Strategy 7. You tune your feeds perfectly. You capture that crystal clear signal hidden in all that noise. Once you have it, how will your team actually use it to stop an adversary? Collecting data is just the foundation. Operationalizing it is the true test of a world-class SOC. And that is exactly what we are going to tackle next time. We'll be seamlessly bridging from data collection into execution with Strategy 8, Leverage Tools to Support Analyst Workflow. We are going to explore how to take all this perfectly curated data and integrate it into SIM, SOAR, and UEBA platforms to really empower your analysts. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I will see you in the next one.